There was one Allied aircraft that German fighter pilots hated chasing more than almost any other. Not because it carried the biggest bombs, not because it had the heaviest guns, but because they usually couldn't catch it. It wasn't built from armoured steel. It wasn't covered in thick aluminum skin. It was built largely from wood, plywood, balsa, spruce. An airplane that many military leaders dismissed as obsolete before it ever flew. Yet this wooden aircraft would become one of the fastest operational aircraft of the entire Second World War. It would outrun German fighters, photograph the Reich in broad daylight, guide bomber formations into enemy territory, destroy Gestapo headquarters with surgical precision, hunt submarines over the Atlantic, sink warships, fight as a night fighter, serve as a Pathfinder, carry bombs heavier than aircraft twice its size. By the end of the war, it had flown more roles than almost any military aircraft in history. The Germans gave it a nickname born out of frustration: the Wooden Wonder. But the Mosquito was never supposed to exist. Britain's Air Ministry tried to stop it. Military experts insisted it was impossible. Even after the prototype flew, many believed it would fail in combat. The aircraft that became one of Britain's greatest wartime successes survived because one engineer ignored nearly everyone telling him he was wrong. His name was Geoffrey de Havilland, and he was betting Britain's future on wood. When the Second World War began in September 1939, nearly every military planner agreed on one thing: future aircraft would become larger, heavier, more powerful, and far more heavily armed. The lessons of the Spanish Civil War seemed obvious. Bombers needed armour, self-sealing fuel tanks, multiple defensive gun turrets, large crews to defend themselves against increasingly capable fighters. Every new bomber became heavier than the one before it. Britain's new heavy bombers reflected that philosophy. The Handley Page Halifax, the Short Stirling, soon the Avro Lancaster, all carried crews of 7, multiple gun positions, thousands of pounds of armour and equipment. Their size gave them tremendous striking power. It also made them slower. De Havilland looked at the same battlefield and reached the opposite conclusion. He believed speed was better protection than armour. If an aircraft could simply fly faster than enemy fighters, it wouldn't need heavy defensive guns. Remove the turrets, remove the armour, reduce the crew, save thousands of pounds, use the weight for speed instead. Most people thought the idea bordered on insanity. The company itself seemed an unlikely source of revolution. Founded in 1920, de Havilland had built a reputation producing elegant civilian aircraft. Their airplanes were lightweight, efficient, and beautifully engineered. The DH-88 Comet won the famous McRobertson air race from England to Australia in 1934. The DH-91 Albatross demonstrated advanced wooden construction on long-distance passenger routes. While competitors invested heavily in aluminium manufacturing, Geoffrey de Havilland continued refining wooden aircraft structures. Not because wood was old-fashioned, because properly engineered wood offered surprising advantages. It was light, strong, easy to repair. It required no strategic aluminum. And Britain had thousands of skilled furniture makers, cabinet builders and carpenters who could manufacture wooden components without competing for the factories already producing Spitfires and Hurricanes. To de Havilland, wood wasn't a compromise, it was an opportunity. In late 1938, de Havilland submitted an unsolicited proposal to the Air Ministry. Almost every company submitted conventional multi-engine bombers. De Havilland submitted something completely different. A sleek twin-engine aircraft with only 2 crew members. No defensive gun turrets, no armour plating, no powered gun positions. Its only defence would be speed. The Air Ministry rejected it almost immediately. Military planners argued that modern bombers without defensive guns would be massacred. The specification demanded turrets. The de Havilland proposal had none. The project quietly disappeared. Most companies would have accepted the decision. Geoffrey de Havilland did not. As war spread across Europe, events began proving that conventional thinking was not working as well as expected. Bombers carrying multiple gun turrets were still suffering catastrophic losses. Armour added weight. Weight reduced speed. Reduced speed made interception easier. Each improvement created another problem. Meanwhile, engine technology was advancing rapidly. Rolls-Royce's Merlin engine, the same engine powering the Spitfire and Hurricane, was becoming dramatically more powerful. De Havilland realised something others had not. Two Merlin engines inside an extremely lightweight airframe could produce extraordinary performance. The numbers looked almost unbelievable. His engineers calculated that their aircraft might actually outrun many frontline fighters, not by carrying more power, by carrying far less weight. In 1940, Britain stood alone. France had fallen. The Battle of Britain raged overhead. Every resource mattered. Aluminium was desperately needed for fighters. Factories worked around the clock. The Air Ministry remained deeply sceptical about allocating valuable Merlin engines to an experimental wooden aircraft. Those engines, they argued, belonged in Spitfires, not in an unproven bomber. Geoffrey de Havilland requested a meeting. He arrived with performance calculations, engineering drawings, and a simple argument. This aircraft would require fewer materials, fewer crew, less maintenance. It could perform reconnaissance without escorts, bomb targets with unprecedented precision, and survive because it would be faster than almost anything attempting to intercept it. Many officials remained unconvinced. One reportedly dismissed the proposal as a plywood fantasy, but de Havilland found an important supporter, Air Chief Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman. Freeman believed Britain needed bold ideas, not merely safer versions of existing aircraft. He backed the project despite fierce resistance inside the Air Ministry. Without Freeman, the Mosquito almost certainly dies on paper. Instead, development begins. Construction started in secret at Salisbury Hall, a country estate north of London that de Havilland converted into an experimental design centre. Instead of large aluminium presses, the workshops resembled fine furniture factories. Layers of birch plywood surrounded a lightweight balsa core. The fuselage halves were moulded separately before being glued together. The result was remarkably smooth. There were fewer rivets, less drag, and an exceptionally strong structure. Many of the workers had never built airplanes before. They built pianos, cabinets, luxury furniture. Now they were building one of the most advanced combat aircraft in history. It looked unlike anything else flying in 1940, and almost nobody believed it would work. Soon, Geoffrey de Havilland would have the chance to prove everyone wrong. The first prototype was nearly ready, but one flight would determine whether Britain's strangest aircraft became a revolutionary weapon, or one of the greatest failures of the war. On November 25th, 1940, the prototype finally rolled onto the runway. It carried the designation W4050. Months of arguments, calculations, and political battles had led to this moment. If Geoffrey de Havilland had been wrong, the project would end before it truly began. The aircraft accelerated. Its twin Merlin engines roared to full power. Within seconds, the wooden airplane lifted into the cold English sky. Test pilot Geoffrey de Havilland Jr., the founder's own son, immediately noticed something extraordinary. The aircraft did not merely fly well, it flew effortlessly. The controls were light, the handling was precise. Most importantly, it was astonishingly fast. As the flight continued, the prototype reached nearly 392 miles per hour. That made it faster than several frontline RAF fighters already defending Britain. And this was not a stripped racing aircraft. It was a full-size twin-engine military airplane. When the flight ended, the Skeptics suddenly had a problem. The impossible had just flown. The official trials confirmed what de Havilland had promised years earlier. The Mosquito required only 2 crew members: pilot, navigator, No waist gunners, no tail gunner, no dorsal turret, no radio operator. Everything about the aircraft was designed around efficiency. Removing the defensive gun positions had reduced drag enormously. The clean fuselage sliced through the air. The aircraft climbed faster than expected, cruised faster than many enemy fighters, and consumed less fuel than heavier bombers. For the first time, the Air Ministry began asking a different question. Not whether the Mosquito could survive, but what couldn't it do? Production began in 1941 under conditions unlike any other aircraft program in Britain. Instead of concentrating manufacturing inside one giant factory, de Havilland spread production across hundreds of civilian workshops. Furniture factories built wing sections. Piano manufacturers produced precision wooden components. Cabinet makers shaped fuselage panels. Even companies that had never built aircraft suddenly became part of Britain's aviation industry. It created an unexpected advantage. German intelligence spent enormous effort targeting Britain's aircraft factories. Destroying a furniture workshop hidden in the countryside accomplished almost nothing. The Mosquito's production network became remarkably difficult to disrupt. While aluminum factories attracted Luftwaffe bombers, wooden aircraft continued quietly taking shape inside ordinary buildings across Britain. The airplane itself had become part of Britain's strategy for surviving total war. Wood also solved another problem. Aluminum had become one of the most valuable strategic materials in the world. Every Spitfire, every Hurricane, every Lancaster, every tank and truck competed for the same limited supply. The Mosquito barely touched it. Birch plywood came from Canada. Balsa wood arrived from Ecuador. Britain's woodworking industry supplied the skilled labour. Instead of competing with other aircraft programs, the Mosquito expanded Britain's total production capacity. It wasn't replacing Spitfires. It was allowing Britain to build something entirely new without slowing anything else down. One controversial decision had quietly multiplied Britain's industrial strength. The first operational Mosquitoes entered service not as bombers, but as photographic reconnaissance aircraft. It was the perfect mission. Reconnaissance crews depended on speed, not weapons. Their job was simple: fly directly over heavily defended enemy territory, photograph everything, return alive. Before the Mosquito, these missions were among the most dangerous in aviation. Slow reconnaissance aircraft often required fighter escorts. Even then, many never returned. The Mosquito changed everything. It simply flew too fast. German fighters scrambled. Radar stations detected it. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire. But by the time interceptors reached the reported position, the Mosquito was already gone. Entire Luftwaffe squadrons found themselves chasing shadows across Europe. One mission demonstrated just how revolutionary the aircraft had become. In 1942, Mosquito reconnaissance crews began flying deep into Germany in broad daylight, not at night, not under cloud cover, in full daylight. They photographed submarine pens, aircraft factories, synthetic fuel plants, rocket research facilities, railway junctions, naval bases. The intelligence they collected became indispensable to Allied planners. Every bombing campaign depended on accurate photographs. Every invasion plan relied upon updated reconnaissance. Without the Mosquito, much of that intelligence simply wouldn't exist. And unlike bomber crews, reconnaissance crews carried no bombs, no guns, no defensive weapons whatsoever, only cameras. Speed had replaced firepower. The Luftwaffe struggled to understand what it was facing. Pilots reported seeing a fast twin-engine aircraft unlike anything they had encountered before. Some believed it was an entirely new fighter. Others assumed it must be lightly loaded during reconnaissance flights. Surely it couldn't carry bombs as well. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Because Geoffrey de Havilland had never designed the Mosquito to perform only one role. From the beginning, he envisioned an aircraft that could become almost anything. Reconnaissance platform, night fighter, maritime strike aircraft, pathfinder, transport, bomber, and remarkably, the same basic airframe could perform them all. Very few aircraft in history have adapted so completely to so many different missions. The Mosquito was about to prove that versatility could become one of the deadliest weapons of the entire war. Its first bombing missions seemed almost unbelievable. Instead of joining massive formations of hundreds of heavy bombers, small groups of Mosquitoes crossed occupied Europe alone or in pairs, flying low, flying fast. They struck individual factories, railway headquarters, power stations, military offices, then disappeared before German defences could organise an effective response. Accuracy replaced quantity. Rather than dropping thousands of bombs over an entire city, Mosquito crews aimed at single buildings. The aircraft became one of the first true precision bombers of the war. It could hit targets that would have required entire bomber formations only a few years earlier, and this was still only the beginning. Soon, the Mosquito would undertake missions so daring that even RAF commanders questioned whether they were possible. It would attack prisons to free resistance fighters. It would strike Gestapo headquarters in the middle of occupied cities. It would lead thousands of heavy bombers through the darkness over Germany. And it would earn a reputation inside the Luftwaffe that no wooden airplane was ever supposed to achieve. The aircraft Britain almost cancelled was about to become Nazi Germany's worst nightmare. By 1943, the Mosquito had become something no military planner had predicted. It was not simply performing one role better than expected. It was outperforming dedicated aircraft in almost every role it was given. Bomber, night fighter, reconnaissance aircraft, maritime strike aircraft, pathfinder, transport. No other combat aircraft of the Second World War served so many different missions so successfully. The airplane Britain's Air Ministry had once dismissed as a dangerous experiment was rapidly becoming one of the most valuable weapons in the entire Allied arsenal. And nowhere was that more obvious than at night. As RAF Bomber Command intensified its offensive against Germany, one problem refused to disappear: finding the target. Entire bomber streams crossed occupied Europe in darkness, cloud, and poor weather. Hundreds of aircraft could arrive over Germany and miss the target by miles. The answer became the Pathfinder force. Their mission was among the most dangerous of the war. Fly ahead of the main bomber stream. Find the objective first. Mark it with coloured target indicators. Then hold position while hundreds of heavy bombers followed their markers through the darkness. The aircraft chosen for that task was not the Lancaster. It was not the Halifax, it was the Mosquito. Its speed allowed it to reach the target first. Its precision allowed crews to place markers with remarkable accuracy. Its survival rate was dramatically higher than the larger bombers that followed. Soon, nearly every major RAF night raid depended on a handful of Mosquitoes arriving minutes before the main force. Thousands of Lancasters found their targets because wooden aircraft showed them where to bomb. The Luftwaffe tried everything to stop them. New radar systems, improved night fighters, dense anti-aircraft defences, searchlights sweeping across the sky. Again and again, the Mosquito slipped through. German pilots often knew exactly where it was. They simply could not reach it. The aircraft climbed too quickly, accelerated too well, and disappeared into the darkness before an attack could be made. Many German night fighter crews later admitted the Mosquito was one of the most frustrating aircraft they ever faced, not because it was heavily armed, because it refused to be caught. Its precision soon made possible missions no heavy bomber could even attempt. On January 30th, 1943, Hermann Goering prepared to deliver a speech celebrating the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power. Berlin was heavily defended. Fighters stood ready. Anti-aircraft guns ringed the city. As Göring began speaking, Mosquito bombers crossed directly over Berlin. Bombs exploded across the capital. ARR raid sirens interrupted the ceremony. The speech stopped. For one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, the embarrassment was impossible to hide. Months later, the RAF did it again. The message echoed across the Reich. No city was safe, not even Berlin. The Mosquito's accuracy became legendary. In February 1944, Royal Air Force Mosquitoes attacked Amiens prison during Operation Jericho, breaching the walls to give captured resistance fighters a chance to escape. Weeks later, they struck Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen. Later still, they destroyed German administrative buildings in Oslo. These weren't area bombing missions. They were precision attacks against individual buildings. Crews often crossed rooftops at incredible speed, releasing bombs with only seconds to spare. Heavy bombers could destroy city blocks. The Mosquito could destroy a single headquarters. Meanwhile, another version of the aircraft fought an entirely different war. Night fighter variants equipped with airborne interception radar hunted German bombers in complete darkness. Instead of waiting for searchlights to illuminate enemy aircraft, radar operators guided pilots toward invisible targets. Within moments, 420mm cannons erupted from beneath the Mosquito's nose. Hundreds of German bombers never returned home. Later in the war, specialized Mosquito squadrons even hunted Germany's own night fighters, clearing the skies ahead of incoming Lancaster formations. The hunter had become the hunted. By 1944, Mosquito production had expanded across Britain and Canada. More than 30 different variants existed. Some carried cameras, some carried rockets. Others mounted heavy cannon. Bomber versions hauled the massive 4,000-pound Cookie Blast bomb, an explosive normally associated with aircraft far larger than the Mosquito. One basic airframe had evolved into one of the most adaptable combat aircraft ever built, and despite flying thousands of missions over occupied Europe, its loss rate remained astonishingly low, not because German pilots lacked skill, but because Geoffrey de Havilland had been right from the very beginning. Speed really was armour. As the war entered its final year, the Mosquito seemed to be everywhere, leading bomber streams, hunting submarines, photographing secret weapons, destroying bridges, attacking railways, flying special operations missions, escorting heavy bombers, interdicting German transport. No other Allied aircraft carried so many responsibilities, and no other aircraft proved so consistently capable of fulfilling them. The airplane that Britain almost cancelled had quietly become one of the greatest force multipliers of the entire war, but its greatest achievement wasn't measured in aircraft destroyed, or bombs dropped, or photographs taken. It was measured in something far harder to calculate: the number of Allied lives it saved. Because by May 1945, the wooden aircraft that experts insisted would never survive combat had become one of the most successful military aircraft ever built, and its extraordinary legacy was only beginning to be understood. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Mosquito had fought from the first years of the war to its very last days. It had served in every major theatre: Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean, Burma, the Pacific. Few aircraft were trusted with so many different missions. Even fewer excelled at all of them. By the end of the war, more than 7,700 Mosquitoes had been built. They had flown hundreds of thousands of operational sorties. They photographed enemy territory, escorted bomber streams, destroyed Vi-1 launch sites, hunted U-boats, intercepted German bombers, attacked Gestapo headquarters, guided Lancasters to their targets, and carried out precision strikes that no other Allied aircraft could safely attempt. No other combat aircraft of the Second World War combined so many roles so successfully. Perhaps the Mosquito's greatest achievement wasn't measured in bombs or victories, it was measured in lives. Compared with Britain's heavy bombers, the Mosquito's loss rate was remarkably low. Lancaster crews often faced terrifying odds. During the height of Bomber Command's offensive, completing a full tour of operations was statistically one of the most dangerous assignments of the entire war. Mosquito crews still flew incredibly hazardous missions. Many never returned. But the aircraft's speed changed the equation. Instead of surviving because it absorbed punishment, it survived because it avoided it. Time after time, German fighters arrived too late. Anti-aircraft batteries fired at empty sky. Radar tracked an aircraft that had already disappeared. The philosophy Geoffrey de Havilland had defended before the war had been proven beyond doubt. Speed could be armour. The Mosquito also transformed aircraft manufacturing. For decades, military aviation had been moving toward larger factories, heavier structures, and increasingly complex production. The Mosquito showed there was another path. Thousands of skilled carpenters, cabinet makers, piano builders, and furniture craftsmen had become aircraft manufacturers almost overnight. Entire sections of the airplane were built in workshops that had never produced military equipment before. The distributed production system made Britain's industry far harder to cripple through bombing. Destroying one factory no longer stopped production. Hundreds of smaller workshops simply kept working. An aircraft made from wood had quietly become one of Britain's most resilient industrial weapons. Its influence reached far beyond the war itself. The Mosquito demonstrated that clean aerodynamic design often mattered more than simply adding horsepower. It proved that reducing weight could deliver greater gains than adding armour. Its multi-role philosophy became the blueprint for future combat aircraft. Instead of designing separate airplanes for reconnaissance, strike missions, interception, and maritime patrol, engineers increasingly sought flexible aircraft capable of performing multiple tasks. Modern multi-role fighters follow the same principle today. One aircraft, many missions. The Mosquito helped prove that concept decades before it became standard. Ironically, the material that made the Mosquito famous also limited its future. Wood had been the perfect wartime solution. But maintaining wooden airframes required constant inspection. Moisture, glue deterioration, and aging gradually weakened the structure. As jet engines transformed military aviation after 1945, aluminum and later advanced alloys became more practical for high-speed flight. Aircraft like the Gloucester Meteor and de Havilland Vampire ushered in the jet age. The Mosquito belonged to a different era. One by one, surviving aircraft left military service. Yet many nations continued operating them well into the 1950s because replacing them proved surprisingly difficult. There simply wasn't another aircraft that could do everything the Mosquito had done. Looking back, it's astonishing how close Britain came to losing it. The Air Ministry nearly cancelled the project. Military experts insisted an unarmed wooden bomber was impossible. The Merlin engines were considered too valuable to waste. Even after the prototype flew, many believed combat would expose fatal flaws. Instead, every major assumption collapsed. The wooden airframe proved incredibly strong. The lack of defensive guns made it faster, not weaker. The simplified design made it easier to build, and the aircraft became one of the most successful combat planes of the entire war. Sometimes history changes because someone invents a better machine. Sometimes it changes because one engineer refuses to accept everyone else's definition of impossible. Geoffrey de Havilland never set out to build the most versatile aircraft of the Second World War. He simply believed everyone else had asked the wrong question. Instead of asking how much armour a bomber needed, He asked how fast it could become without it. That single decision changed everything. The Mosquito embarrassed the Luftwaffe, protected Allied bomber crews, saved countless reconnaissance pilots, delivered precision attacks that shaped the course of the war, and proved that innovation doesn't always come from adding more. Sometimes it comes from having the courage to remove what everyone else believes is essential. The aircraft made from plywood became one of the finest combat aircraft ever built, not despite being made of wood, but because of it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the aircraft, engineering breakthroughs, and untold stories that shaped World War II. And let me know in the comments, which legendary aircraft should we cover next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.